Got a little upgrade for the 1220 we're going to start working on soon. I'm going to show you what it is here in just a minute. All right, so my little 1220, you guys have been watching my video for a while. There's nothing crazy about it. You know, it's an awesome little mill. I love this little mill. But I've just got 3 standard bed sections, which lets me cut technically up to 20 feet long. Now, using my cable drive system, because of where my cable stops are at here on this bottom rail, I lose a couple inches on this end and I lose a couple inches on the other end. So I've been telling people from a practical standpoint that I could cut 19 feet long. Now on Joe's wood miser, yeah, it's over there somewhere. He can cut 20 feet long, 20'6", something like that's the carriage length. So we've been doing our 20-foot stuff over there, and I've been using the little Timber King for just, you know, whatever, shorter stuff. But the big announcement that I recently acquired is 3 more bed sections. So now, theoretically, I'll be able to cut 40 foot long. Now, will anyone ever order a 40-foot beam? Lord, I hope not, because then I'd have to find a 40-foot log. And that would take all sorts of extensive work to get that 40-foot log. I'm being lazy, I'm gonna put my phone down here on the mill to talk to you. It could be done, yes. I've got a 32-foot trailer. I could let that log hang 8 feet off the back, red flag it, and I'd be fine. But to handle a log of any decent diameter that long, because certainly if somebody's going to order a beam that long, if they really thought they were going to do a 40-foot free span, that's insane. But a 40-foot free span, you'd have to have like a 20-inch high beam. So then you'd be talking like a 6x20 or an 8x20, which means you got to have like a 24-inch small end at 40 feet, which means your big end would be just asinine. I don't know. You know, take a guess, 36, 40 inches, I don't know. Huge. So that would be one where I would have to take the tree down, load it with my excavator, or load it with something a lot bigger than the skid steer, and be able to unload it here instead of on the mill with the excavator. It could all be done, you know. But if that's what somebody asks for, I guess I'll figure up all the costs and quote them. You know, but I had a guy the other day was asking me for some beams, and I told him I just bought these extensions, and he said, "Oh, cool! So you'll be able to cut me, you'll be able to cut 30-foot 2x6s." And I said, "Dude, there is no practical way that you could be using 2x6s 30 feet. Yeah, I got to build a porch." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're gonna have a center support somewhere." You know, I was like, the cost on a 30-foot long 2x6 that's gonna sag extensively over that free span. If you try to do a free span, you know, the cost would be insane. Like, no, put in a center brace, make it a 15-foot free span, so a 16-foot board, you know, and that's extremely common and cheaper. Anyway, so the point is, long story short, why did I get the bed extensions? I've looked at them for a while, looked at them here and there. Brand new from Timber King right now. It's early 2022. They're probably $900 to $1,000. Excuse me. Plus you know, who knows what the backlog time would be to even get them. Call them $900 a piece, brand new. If I could go buy them off the shelf today, I got all 3 of these for $900. And they're missing some stuff. They're missing some cross braces here and there. I've got to fix some bolts, but generally speaking, the framework is there, and that's what's expensive. I can go get the 1-inch steel bar. I can order a few more of, you know, the log stops, which on a beam that long, I could actually move. I've got a bunch of log stops here in my main bed. I actually went through about a year ago, and I put log stops at almost every single junction. So I got a ton of extras in here. So I can spread those out. Of course, on a beam that long, realistically, you'd only need like 3 log stops, you know? Like you don't need 20 of them down the whole length. You just need a couple to make sure the ends in the middle don't get pushed. So, but anyway, the point is I've been cutting, 20-foot, relatively standard boards on Joe's mill. We've been cutting a lot of 20-foot stock. But I've had people asking for, 24, 26, 28, even some 32-foot long beams, and I've had to turn them away. Well, no more. So, interestingly enough, I had made a post on the Timber King Facebook page about doing something else with my 1220, and this guy just commented and said, hey, I got 3 extra bed sections, for the old model 1220 if you're interested. And I said, yeah, you know what, I think I am. Because I've turned down probably, in the last year, I probably turned down 20 orders that I could have had. And they weren't super long beams, like I said, 22, 24, they were just a hair over 20. So I thought, man, that's easy money. $900 for 3 bed sections, and you're talking a couple of orders on these super long beams, and it's paid for, so there's nothing to it. But it just so happened it kind of popped up at the same time. Basically, he commented and said he had them, and the next day I had a guy message me and ask, could I cut a 24-foot beam? And I said, you know what, I think I can. And so I kind of started going back and forth with that guy. I quoted him on it, and turned around and got a hold of this guy and bought them. And by the time I went and bought these bed sections, I already had the deposit for the 24-foot beams. So I'm already on my way to getting it paid for. So anyway, that's all the logic. That's neither here nor there. Although, I guess it is kind of both. But we've got an overhaul to do here on the 1220 as it sits. It's been sitting in the dirt like this ever since I've set it up. Somewhere underneath of this sawdust and bark, theoretically, there are some pine 6x, I think. They've probably all but rotted away by now. I put them under there 2 or 3 years ago. Untreated pine, ground contact. Let me see if I can even... Yeah, seriously, they're gone. Here, there's one. There's one hiding down there in the dirt. But they're all growed up and buried up. So I'm gonna do a total reset on the mill. We're gonna take the carriage off. We're gonna take these 3 bed sections, pick them up and move them. I might unbolt them, but I'm gonna see if I can do it without unbolting them, if I can just pick it up and spin them around. But we're gonna pick all this up out of the way. We're gonna come through here with the skid steer, clean all this out, scrape it back down to good hard packed dirt, which I know is underneath of all this just from walking around and stomping on it for the last few years. It's really hard underneath of here. I'm not gonna do a concrete slab or anything like that. But then I'm cutting these 8-inch thick red oak sleepers. So I'm not doing them 8x8 square. They don't have to be. They're gonna still be round on both edges. But two parallel faces 8-inch apart. And see our bed section, our bed section here between the bolts, which your bolts is your leveling feet, is basically 32 inches on the inside of the bed. So I'm gonna cut these sleepers at 36 inches. That way I know I've got, extra couple of inches, make sure it won't be any problem. I'm gonna put sleepers underneath of every single set of feet, which there's 4 feet per bed section. So that's, I'll need 2 per bed section, 6 bed sections, I'll need 12 sleepers. So we're gonna do 12 of these 8x8s or 8-inch thick sleepers. And then I think I'm gonna do some sort of cross tie on them. Like I'll do just some 2x4s or something, just to kind of tie them together so they can't shift right and left. But I'm hoping doing that should be enough to kind of shim everything up and level it up easy enough. Get the mill a little bit higher off the ground. Because yeah, like I said, right now it literally sits, it appears to sit on the ground because dirt and bark and everything is all piled up around it over the years. So I'll see how much of that footage I can capture. It's not going to be crazy. The carriage, for those of you that are familiar with these 1220s, super simple. I picked it up with a chain before, or you can actually, if you're good and artsy, you can get a set of tractor forks or skid steer forks right there underneath that top bar. Pick it up. We'll back up. We'll set it on a spare bed section somewhere for now, or I'll set it up on some beams. I don't want to set it in the dirt just because of the carriage rollers down low. I don't want to pack mud in those and ruin those bearings. So we'll set it up on something. We'll pull these 3 bed sections out of here, scoop it out, clean it all up real nice and level, get our sleepers down, set them back on. It won't take but a couple of hours. I I have to commit to it, of course. But yeah, anyway, just want to make that video. Want to brag about my bed extensions. I will probably just show you how it all looks when it's done. Well, we got her torn apart and cleaned up. I think it's not really what I wanted to do. My thought, I think, as I mentioned in the intro video, was that I was going to just shave a little bit off the top here, shave a little bit of the sawdust up and bark, and then just set right back on the good compacted dirt. But I'm not very good at shaving, so I took a big dish out right in here. And of course the ground wasn't perfect level to begin with. And actually this ground has all come up with the mill sitting here for several years and me driving back and forth and coming up to it and pushing, kind of bulldozing mud and sawdust piling up. The elevation here has actually risen a little bit. We've built some soil, I guess, at least locally, maybe moved some soil. Anyway, so I got it rigged down this morning. All you have to do, I had to unhook my drive cable, slip it over the pulley, which I never use it anymore anyway. Pick the carriage up there with the forks on the skid steer, which is a very delicate process, and then backed it up, set it down over there on just some 2x4s on the ground so the rollers aren't sitting in the dirt. Picked up the entire assembled existing frame with the forks. Just my forks aren't long enough to get all the way under both sides, so I just picked up from one side. It should be fine. It's all bolted together. It's very rigid. So I just picked it up in the middle, turned over there, and of course then all the legs fell down out the bottom, which actually works like little kickstands to hold it up. So I just set it down over there, backed out, put the bucket on, came in here, cleaned all this out, and then went and got a couple buckets of dirt and just tried to kind of sprinkle in and just worked back and forth a few passes to try to kind of level it. Generally, it's nowhere near perfect, but just leveled it out the best I could. I did actually start the morning cutting all my beams, so that's all red oak, just 8-inch thick cants that I cut that I'm going to use for my cross beams to really support the mill. In the past, I had it sitting on those pine, and you can see one there. And I think they were like 4-inch cants, which actually I was surprised. I went to pull them out. Those were actually, they still stayed intact. I'm sure they're soft, but they actually dug out and didn't just crumble like I thought they would. Anyway, we're gonna go with 8-inch red oak this time on the cants to be the beams. And before I had, long, I had those as, 10 or 12 foot long beams under the mill to help spread the weight between the feet. And now with these 8-inch cants, I'm going to be going back to each 2 feet will sit on a cant. So the effective 12 big feet that I'll have, each 2 will be tied together basically. So each 2 feet here, whoops, I'm zoomed in. Each 2 feet here on the mill beside each other will sit on one beam. So down the length of the mill they won't be tied, but side to side they'll be tied. But I think it'll still be, with it being big thick 8-inch oak, I think we'll be okay as far as it not wanting to flex or move too much. But we will have to get it set up, and then it'll want to sink and settle a little bit, I'm sure, and so we'll have to keep an eye on it the first few times we put a log on it and cut to make sure that everything's staying like it's supposed to. So now I got to take some lunch and then run to town and get hardware. Hopefully Tractor Supply has what I need. It's usually pretty slim pickings, especially nowadays. They never have any hardware that I need, but maybe because I'm buying bigger bolts, they'll actually have it. Maybe, hopefully. And I gotta buy some all thread because I gotta make the feet. Anyway, last thing I did was I checked, set a pin here, a set of stake. Basically that's gonna be the very, very end of the track. I actually had to shove some of that walnut, I'm storing that for free for a client, and it's one of those things, oh yeah, we'll hold it for a couple of months or a year or whatever, but whatever, it's walnut, so if he ends up abandoning it, that's a lot of walnut, so I don't mind storing that. Anyway, set a stake there, measured out. It is 48 feet out here. Each bed section is just shy of 8 feet. They're like 7'10" bolt to bolt. So just call it 8 feet, 6 sections. 48 feet is right here, which is pretty much right in my road. My whole road is going to shift a little bit closer to the pond, but it's going to be tight. It's going to be tight coming through here. It's not really ideal, but You know, I'm used to having little tight roads where I've got to pick the log up and over stuff. So coming around this corner with, you know, 30, 34 foot logs, whatever, that log's gonna be hanging out over the pond and it's gonna be hanging out over the mill. And I'm gonna have to come back in here and find a way to twist around. I'm gonna get all this other garbage cleaned up. I've had all this stuff sitting out here for years. This toolbox that I don't use, full of rainwater. All these stickers that I cut that I do sometimes use, but that's all just red oak scrap over there. So all this stuff just kind of piles up around the mill. And since I've been using this mill a lot less, the mess just kind of stays. So that'll be hopefully get all picked up today. I'll just come through here. Honestly, I'm just gonna, well, no, I'm not gonna bulldoze it. Anyway, yeah, that's it for your update for right now. Everything is basically ready to reset the mill. So I'm gonna go get my bolts and I'll cut my cants down there to 3 feet long, and then we'll start laying them out and start dropping some beds on, see what we can do. All right, well, here's the rundown. Got the ground kind of leveled up. Got the bed sections all set back in. And had to go through my original 3 because those feet hadn't been adjusted in years. So of course they were rusted up. Had to get a torch out, heat them all up, break them loose. Got all of them, or 11 out of 12 done finally. And got them all, got the threads cleaned up, put anti-seize on them. Got them to where they were handy back and forth all the way, except for one that jammed up, and I ended up twisting it off. And I don't even remember which one it is. Well, we can find it. It's gonna be the one that didn't got a, oh, right there. Doesn't got a nut on it, because I took the nut off the back. I was trying to thread the rod all the way out. And I was just gonna replace it, but it didn't make it. Anyway, the rest are all movable. And I was just working on bolting up the next, the addition here, the first addition. And I'll show you the one trick that I was doing, because the bolts that hold them together are like 2.5, 3 inches long. The ones that were in there I measured at 2.5. I bought 2s, they're not long enough. So those go back, but there's plenty of room on either side. So those will go back, and I'll probably just get 3s to make sure I've got more than enough room. Anyway, what I had to do, because of how this little male rod sticks out, it has to slip inside that pipe. That's a very, very, very fine fit. Pretty much impossible to line it up on your own from a distance. So I took some of the feet that I had built and used them as basically puller studs. Slipped it through, put a nut on both sides, tightened the nut down, and got it to where they were just touching, and actually kind of in a bind actually. And then when I was able to just use my hammer here just to kind of pry and wiggle that track section around a little bit to get that rod to pop in, and threw some anti-seize on it, of course, might as well, I don't want them to rust together. But yeah, pulled it together enough that I realized my bolts were too short. I actually got that side over there is pulled all the way together now, and this side here has got another 1/4 inch to go, but you get the idea. So we'll get that one pulled on and the next one pulled on. That last bed section has a foot that the last guy that I bought them from, he was trying to fix it. Messed it up worse. It's got a bunch of slag and crap in there because he was trying to cut it out with a torch. And of course now I've got one that I just showed you that I made that's a problem. And so for this foot here, I'm just gonna have to shim it to get it exactly level where I need. And that's, I've got one order. I had 2. The other guy, unfortunately, was a very large order, and then he called me back and had to cancel because the city revoked his septic permit for the timber frame that he wants to build. So he's got to have, he can't build the timber frame anyway for right now, and he needs his money back so that he can fix his septic and then save up for the timber frame. Hopefully that all comes back through. He sounded like an older gentleman, didn't sound like somebody making up a, a story. He just paid the deposit last night, so I don't know why he would have been like, yeah, let me pay the deposit just so I can take it back and mess with you. Anyway. Yeah, so this is it for now. Once I get all the track sections bolted up, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and bolt that last one on for now, just so that I can say it's all put together, and I'll work on getting it all leveled and shimmed. But I want to get it all bolted together first, and then I'll basically just pick it up as needed with the forks to be able to slip my block, you know, wherever I need to pick it up, or wrap a chain around the center beam and pick up so I can slip my my blocks underneath of it. And yeah, then we'll get the feet tightened down, shimmed up, whatever we got to do, get her all leveled out and start cutting some beams. All right, so we've skipped a little bit of footage, and again, that's just because we were working. But we're gonna wrap up the video here on extending the mill out to 40 feet, and I'm just gonna explain to you guys what we had to do. We've already cut this morning, you know, because this is YouTube Gold, so I went ahead and did a test run. Anyway, we've already cut a beam this morning to make sure, but to make sure that everything was fine. But as far as stretching the mill goes, you know, it's to go from 20 feet to 40 feet, it's just another 20 feet. It's nothing crazy, but the most difficult part, because we're on uneven ground, the most difficult part obviously was getting the bed all level, every single bed section all the way down at the same elevation. And so to do that, a couple things that we figured out, what we ended up doing was using a transit. So we had our transit set over here. Actually, it was set right here off the end of the mill, so we could sight all the way down the mill bed. Of course, we didn't have the carriage on in the way. And then we, just based off the ground level, we found where the highest point in the ground was, which was up here at this top end. So this basically became our zero. Everything had to come up from here. We couldn't go down any further. So that whole end is actually sloping down. It was about 4 inches on the ground level, but it actually dips down right here, then goes back up and then tapers off. So we basically just picked this top front rail as our 0 point, and when we shot off that with a transit, it was 2.9 feet. Now I say 2.9, the grade stake has engineering on one side, which is 1/10 of a foot, and then the increments are there's 5 increments between each 1/10, so you can get down to, what is that, 20ths of a foot? Anyway, 1/10 of a foot is the main, no, 100ths of a foot, I guess. Shoot, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Gosh darn it, now I want to know. That's got to be 100ths of a foot, right? From 2 to 3, there's probably 100 tick marks. There's 1/10ths, and then yeah, each 1/10 is in 5ths. So that would be 50 grade marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 50. So you can get down to 50ths of a foot, or you can get 100ths of a foot if you're, you know, kind of shooting between the lines. Anyway, so we were 2.9 feet was just what it happened to be. We took and raised the far end, the very last rail, pulled it all the way up so that it was 2.9 feet. Went ahead and shimmed it, secured it, did all that. And we had the whole bed section in the middle, basically up off the blocks, floating. And we said, okay, well, the way that is, it's such a long stretch, you know, it's gonna sag. And so then we'll just lower the, you know, we'll put our little jack feet down and we'll bring it all up to level. Reading off a bubble level over a distance that long, you think, oh, that looks like it's centered up. It's not. So the transit was really critical. And I know, of course, other people said, you know, you can stretch a really tight string line, measure down from the string line. Yeah, sure, fine, that's fine. String line's still gonna sag a little bit, in my opinion. But it's gonna get you really, really close. The transit is spot on. The only error in the transit is me saying, well, it's the top of the line or the bottom of the line, but it's still on the line. Anyway, so we had it to where the whole bed was sagging, and we could push on it and it would bounce. We started coming up from the far end, trying to set them all at 2.9 feet, and it actually was doming up. So in the middle of the bed, even though it was sagging, it was still arched up like that. And we thought, well, what in the heck? How are we going to pull this bed down? And we're sitting here thinking the frames are bent somehow. But what we finally realized, and I want to mention this because I've never heard anybody else say this, these connection points on the rails, there is you can hardly see it, but right here, there is a junction between these two tubes, and one of these tubes, I don't remember if it's the front or the back, I think it's the back here, has a rod that extends into this tube. So that is what gives you a good, smooth, seamless transition, is this rod and tube. These frame rails do not have to touch each other, but in your mind, in my mind, I need to crank them bolts down to pull these frames together, but that's not what matters. This is your zero. I had my bed bolts so tight, these bottom ones were tight, to where it was actually trying to squeeze these together and it was bending right here. That's what was making the bed dome up in the middle. So what we ended up doing was going through and loosening all those bed bolts all the way down. Left them in, left the nut on them still, but just loosened them so they could move. And as soon as we did that, that whole frame relaxed and set down like it was supposed to. And then we jacked it back up to level. So we went all the way down. We checked every single rail, 2.9 feet, dead nuts. And we did that by adjusting these actual adjustment feet here. And then once we got all those set, then we went back on these bed bolts and just snugged them up just so they couldn't, so the tracks couldn't slip apart. But that's the only function they serve. It's just keeping the track from slipping apart. They don't have to be crazy tight, just enough that they're not gonna shake loose. So we did all that. That's how we leveled it up using the transit. Got it all dead on. I fully expected that this morning when we set the first log on that some of it would squish in the mud, but you have to remember this weight is distributed, okay? It's all the way across all of these blocks. So the ones in the middle there, yeah, sure, they're sitting in a mud hole, but these up here are on solid ground. So they're not gonna squish, they're not gonna move, and those in the middle, if they try to squish a little bit, they might, but they're not carrying the full weight of the log, not even close. In fact, some of the weight of this log is actually transferred all the way to the far end through those blocks down there, even though the log isn't sitting on the bed there. So you wrap your head around that, even if the log is 1,000 pounds, that 1,000 pounds is being transferred down through 24 feet onto 12 blocks. It spreads that weight out pretty quick to where it's really not as much risk as you would think of it squishing. Anyway, got the first log up here, cut it. We had over 26 feet, we had a 1/4 inch of taper, and actually through about 20 feet of the log, it was dead on. The last couple of feet, it thinned out a little bit, and the best we could figure was that actually was tension in the log, because by the time we were done with that 26-foot 4x8, you could, where it was stood up off the end of the track at the far end, you could push it down by hand and it would flex down and sit on the track. So that very much was tension. I mean, you look at this log here, this is the next one that I just set up here. Obviously, it's not great. It's got a crazy little bow in it. The last one was just as bad, but they're the best I got. They're gonna work, but they are gonna have some bow into them. Anyway, I'm gonna make another video about cutting these big beams, but for right now, I just wanted to wrap up the video about actually extending the frame, leveling the bed, and I wanted to, like I said, go over a little bit of detail there on how we did those, how we had to adjust the bed, because it was just one of those things. Honestly, I would probably never have thought about it. But my wife was out here helping me, and she does all of our cabinet work. And we've seen that same thing happen when we glue up a big countertop or tabletop. If all your clamps are on one side and they're super tight, they can actually cause that whole tabletop to want to flex in that direction. So, yeah, having her out here helping me, that kind of actually, I got to thinking about it like a tabletop. Anyway, super cool, super excited. Like I said, now we can go out to 40 feet. We've been declining. I don't know how I got zoomed in there. That's funny. We've been declining work over the last few months. People wanting beams over 20 feet long. We've had to turn them down, but not anymore, baby. Bring it on.